G'day and welcome to the Inforunners. I'm Execute. Today I'm joined by the Astropub and Pyreworm is back again. So Pyreworm is our sea boat captain, is his profession, and I thought, well, if we did some speculation on the Odyssey, we probably should do some for the raft, and the raft's out tomorrow. So I managed to get Pyreworm, and of course I had to get Paul, who's the master of ARGO. So we'll have a play with both of these gentlemen, so to speak, and see what we feel has come out. So I'm going to kind of show what the group has found and speculated and thinks going on, and we'll get some talk back from these two and see what they think, and hopefully you guys can listen on the comments below as well what you think it could be. This is just fun. It's just a bit of speculation, and if you don't want to participate and don't want it to be spoiled, turn off the video now. Other than that, here we go over to the browser. So I managed to get these models, much like the Odyssey off Grim Starjump. He was kind enough to give them to me. He gave them to me in two pieces though. So this is the internals. So what would you would see if you were looking in at the ships if the the skin was missing, and the actual outside as well. Right. Where to start? I think the biggest revelation that we kind of possibly think here is what Badger's found. So what Badger's noticed was it looks like the ship potentially extends, and the things that lead to that is there's a couple of things. You kind of see these two track pieces that look very the same, with a diagonal piece that would allow it to pop in behind the other one, and obviously the zipping backwards and forwards of all the cables, and that's on both sides. You can also see things like this rail that's on the side of this cab here, which would allow that to extend. And if you go into the bottom and kind of look down at these rails, you'll even notice that these rails have this U shape where they're kind of tucked into each other, which would allow them to extend as well. And then the final thing I think that kind of leads to that one is if the ship extends, much like the Anvil Crucible, you would have to readjust the engine, because this back one would just go with it, so that doesn't need to readjust. But this one here would have to come back to recenter that center of mass. And again, you can actually see it's connected to this, I guess, rectangular piece, and that can go backwards and forwards just slightly on these rails here, which allows it to do that. So, Pyro, I think I'll just ask you, what do you think about that possibly extending like that, mate?
I can see with all that rails either extending, or the thought I just had here staring at it was perhaps this is the extended shape and it collapses down.
Even further than this, the opposite. Okay.
Yeah, the opposite. And thinking about just what I had seen where it says it accommodates 3 of the boxes, what happens when you have 0 boxes? Like, what does it just sit empty? So that was my converse thought. I don't have a lot of
don't see it. To me, it looks packed up already, like, because it's all stacked on each other. So I'd say it's far more likely to extend, personally.
Yeah, the only thought that I had that stood behind it is when you look at the interior model stuff, that maybe all of that telescoping framing sits actually outside of what we see the interior is.
So just to give you an idea, see this kind of white area here, and I'm moving my mouse, and I know you guys that are watching the video cannot see that, but this front white area here is basically the internals go all in there. There is nothing from that secondary model that goes in this back part, because if you want to look at it, see how there's this cab, right? The cab. If I go back to the external model and I line this up for you in a similar fashion, there's the cab. So there is no externals that go into the back area at all. So there's the cab, and there's the front part. So yeah, all that internals and he's talking about stuff I showed him before the video, guys. So yeah, there is no there's no internals inside that area, which also gives credence to the ability for it to unpack and pack back up, because then there's nothing that you can actually walk into to be in the way.
Yeah.
Paul, your thoughts there? What are your thoughts? Because you know I'm pretty crazy, and you tend to bring me back down to earth. So yeah.
It seems to at least match up a little bit. I wouldn't expect this to be able to unravel like that on release. Like I don't think tomorrow we'll have this in
Agreed.
game and suddenly it'll be able to open and close it, because they got to wait for things like um, the same ability with the whole C and the whole series, I should say.
Yep.
But it makes sense based off of the lore, and I'll say again, the lore tells us a lot about the game. It always does, and you can always find out a lot about what a ship's design is going to be based off of what manufacturer it is. And Argo's main focus is almost always infrastructure ships. The Argo MPUV is just a tender, a fleet tender. The idea that they can go back and forth and transport, and kind of has this like Swiss Army knife appeal, where you, depending on the module you use, you can do different things. Which gives bigger ships a little bit more flexibility. The SRV is simply a tow truck. It's quite literally the closest we have to a tugboat. Its job is to push and pull slightly larger ships out of the way, possibly if they're too heavy or too damaged. So it works a similar way. It's like a larger the SRV is like a larger MPUV with the ability to be a tugboat. So this being something kind of like a cargo crane or kind of like a light freight to be able to travel from surface to shore makes sense. And so with that in mind, the idea that it could expand and contract to be able to fit certain locations would make a lot of sense as well.
Paul giving me a little bit of the game away there with the crane, but we'll talk about that in a second. But I was going to say the mole seems to be the exception, not the rule, when it comes to Argo. I think a lot of their stuff seems to work around I call them ports, but like what would be a seaport in our day and age. So yeah, we kind of think that this could possibly be a sky crane. Now, I want to run that by you, Pyroworm, and there's a couple of reasons for that. We know that they've got the 3 crates, and as Paul suggested, I think this initially will just be a cargo ship that you can fly between places and do 96 SC of cargo. But when they bring that expanded ability in, we think it might be a cargo crane, and I hope I clicked the right picture here. Of course, I clicked the wrong one, to unload the whole sea. And this comes courtesy of Grim as well, who I talk with quite frequently. And yeah, 3 abreast on the spindle, and you could probably have 4 or even up to 8, because there is actually 8 spindles on the whole sea of these ships unloading at the same time. And they would basically just drop these cargo crates off onto the station itself for them to be redistributed. A lot of people talk, like I know Grib did an episode and he was talking about how they would take it down to planet, and he was telling me that it would take 120 loads for one ship to go all the way down to planet. But I don't think they're going to go down to planet. I think they're going to drop them at the space station, because we've seen those cargo containers on the space station where they're all stacked there, and I think they'll kind of be left there and then be redistributed to not just the planet but other moons around that station's orbit. Now, logistics better than I, Pyro. How is it done in the real world? Is it done in multiple station drop-offs, or is it like a key location and it's all like arteries and it's fed out? How does that work?
All depends on the infrastructure. And
Okay.
in this case, the observation that 3 and 3 does seem sort of fortuitous. In this instance, if you're at a port facility that doesn't have the ability to strip the containers off the hull sea itself, say a less built up facility, then yeah, one of these, 3 at a time, boom, you can just strip a whole spindle off with one of these. Cargo transshipment is what it makes me think of. Offshore transshipment locations. So, like for instance, in the Gulf of Mexico, there's a couple designated areas where big tankers pull up and anchor off or what have you, and smaller tankers come alongside them and offload a portion of their oil to take that into port, because the tankers are too big to go into, say, Lake Charles or something like that. So same with a container ship. If you've got a relatively minor station along the route where it's worthwhile to stop, you're going to offload a number of containers, but they don't necessarily have the facilities, then yeah, something like this could do the trick. Likewise, this could be the ship to shore, if you will, or station to shore carrier, where you can collect 3 boxes at a time and go down dirt side or go to the moon or what have you. It seems like a nice scale up of that, uh, while not having to go through the time and effort of unlimbering the boxes of their contents and moving them into
So-
other storage factors.
So one, like, I actually liked what you said there about the ore containers, because we have the advantage of space, where right now in the real world we don't kind of have that, and I mean space is in anti-gravity, so I can see them leaning into that a bit more. Okay. So I'm gonna show you guys the interior and the layout of the rooms, and then I'm gonna show you this last room that kind of this is where we kind of go more into the heavy speculation stuff. So this model is a little bugged. So some of the rooms don't actually have walls and stuff. So this first room here I'll show you because it doesn't have walls. But this is the living quarters type of room where you'd come and change your suits, go to the toilet, that type of thing. As far as we can tell, this is for the pilot to change his suit, because his tender is going to be staying on inside the ship, a gun rack for both of them, and then the co-pilot, because he goes between the cab and potentially outside, he gets 2 seats. And one of the reasons I talk about that is this ship has an airlock on the front, and the only other one that we know that has an air like that on the front is the Hammerhead, and that's for boarding. And so it's also got this weird mechanism for in the script. There's another one from the preview image, the OAE trailer. It actually shows this black area here is kind of like condensable, like it's like a shock absorber. And I'll just ask you both, what do you think this could be? It almost looks like it could carry a container, or is it literally just a shock absorber? What are your thoughts on this front area?
It's probably just a bumper. Like,
Right.
if the crew is supposed to transfer through that front little docking area, you're going to need to have some sort of absorption so that you're not bouncing into ships, because you're probably not going to have a tight seal. So you have to kind of like get close and then bump up against a ship to
Makes sense.
And
is that similar to the old tugboats with the tires on the side?
Yep.
Just more modern technology. Yeah. Pyro,
it's like a bumper that we have in our cars.
Yeah. Would you agree with that?
Yes,
Pyro?
it very much looks to me like a small push boat front end. So like for round little ports, whenever you got like a little barge and you're doing hull maintenance on the side of a vessel or whatnot, usually they have these little flat fronted push boats, and you just strap a little skiff barge to it and push it around. That's what I thought of looking at first. Either that, but if you notice that top assembly is split oddly into 2 pieces, and
I'm going to talk about that in just a second. You'll give me a little bit of leeway.
Yep. So
I want to come back to this door.
Yep. So
right?
all I was going to say is that evident sort of articulation, or that split, makes me think it does a little more than just turn spaceships into a contact sport.
Yeah. So I'll go through the ship. So basically, I can't really show you the front that well because the doors are out of alignment. But basically, you've got a front cab with a room directly behind it. So I'll just show you the front cab, and there's 2 seats in this. It's an empty room here that's full of doors, unfortunately. And I go around the bottom where the elevator goes in the floor. It actually goes up 2 floors to the top. So unlike the mole where it just goes directly into the back of the ship, this thing goes all the way to the top. And then, so you've got the cab room here at the back. This is a corridor similar to the Redeemer that's full of components. And this is the really interesting room. Oh, wait. Oh, actually, I'll save that. I've got to show you the living quarters too, because the living quarters are probably some of the nicest living quarters we've seen. I've just got to find them. I'm lost. There I am. So I got to scroll the mouse wheel. The controls are not the best on this. Right, so here we go. So this is probably I don't know, you guys tell me, but I think it's some of the nicest living quarters we've seen so far on a ship. It's really got a nice retro vibe. It even reminds me of Aliens in a weird way. 1970s deco. What do you want to call it? What's your thoughts on that, guys, as the living quarters go?
I mean, actually, kind of really nice for what you would expect to be some sort of lightering vessel or uh, port runabout or something like that. It kind of suggests to
Mm.
me that the ship is intended or capable of doing a bit more than just bouncing from a cargo ship to a station, or even uh
Mm.
from orbit down to a planet. Kind of
S-
a little
So that's
nicer than
the
I'd expected.
door that goes to that suit room that I was showing you before. Yeah. All right. So I've kind of delayed it enough. So we'll move up to
I,
this
I,
last.
I will
Oh, Paul.
say,
Sorry.
I'll
Yeah.
say one
Sorry,
thing
Paul.
about that before you go.
Yeah. Sorry.
Is one of the things that stuck out about that room is for me is that because Argo is designed has a lot of its ships are designed to operate in places without infrastructure. I could see if this is even if this is like a cargo lightering or port runabout.
Mm.
If there is no port, but you still need to offload things,
Mm-hmm.
you may need a place where these people can sleep
Exactly.
while they're between shifts.
Or even
So
going between places that don't have a crane that needs them to unload. I can see that too,
yeah,
Paul. So yeah, I agree.
so it's more of a Argo trying to build in multi-functionality. So like yeah, you might see these mostly around ports, but every so often you go to a place like Nyx where they may not have port facilities and all of their little outposts. So you need something like this to be able to come in and sit down and unload, and then when the day is done, they go stay on the planet instead of having to check into a hotel. They just pop into their beds and sleep.
Yeah. So here's the
Yeah.
elevator that comes upstairs that I was trying to show you before. This is the thing that has had us probably the most stumped, right? And we know it's some kind of control console because you can see it right there. So you have to activate it somehow. And what we're stumped on, this is what we've come down to. So I'm going to run them through, and this is where we kind of get into the speculation stuff, I think, more than anything else, right? So straight off the bat, we talked about the ship extending. So what if it's simply the pump that helps it extend? Like it has some kind of hydraulics that makes it extend and close back. That was the best one that one of our guys came out with. Came out with that one. And then these are the other two where we get into a bit more speculation. So if you have a ship at a port and you are bringing large containers of different materials. Now we know from the Starfarer they're going to have solids, liquids, and gases, so that you'll have to at least have two types of cargo containers, solids and gases. And what we thought this could potentially be is a pumping system that allows you to switch them between different containers. So a really big hull C comes in as a big container, but you want to put a small container on a smaller ship. It allows you to transfer it from one container to another. That was our second thought. And the last one, which comes back to this door, and I guess for the trading of cargo containers, because we actually thought that this could hold a cargo container because of this clip mechanism here. I don't know if you can see that. Can you picture this rotating here and folding over the edge of a cargo and then pulling back? We thought that might be able to actually allow this to hold some kind of container in front of the ship. And as you said, Pyro, with this door, we're wondering what if a hose mechanism comes out, which also explains why he has to come out to potentially make sure it's connected properly to the container, or refueling of ships. And from what we've seen, this ship does have a lot of quantum fuel cargo.
Quantum fuel.
Yeah. So that's the three things that we thought of for this room. I think they're all viable. I don't think they need all three of them, but I think they're all viable. So what based on that, I'll start with Pyro. Well, actually, no, I'll start with Paul. Paul, what do you think just based on those three? So either refueling ships, transferring liquid and gas cargo, or just simply expanding the ship backwards and forwards.
Well, I think you're onto something about the liquid cargo, but I also think that the liquid cargo could also be a refueling thing as well. It could be both. Those things could be the same because
there is multiple pumps in
yeah.
that room.
Yeah, and you could easily just like say, hey, the cargo, like it could effectively, the way that I understand that how fuel is going to work, you use a system to fill up the tanks, but the tanks themselves, say on a Starfarer, are also just the cargo. Because you can also swap out those cargo containers for other things. And in theory, because they're liquid, you could put anything in that liquid container. So if you wanted to transfer out that liquid, you'd probably need to use the same hose that you're using to dock and refuel. So that would make sense as well, that you could use the quantum containers or whatever else liquid containers you had. I don't think you'd probably have a ton of liquid containers on something like this, but so I think it would probably most likely be fueling. It could also be refueling, in a sense. That's where it gets its refueling from. Instead of having refueling something else, it kind of, that's its, where the Starfare comes in, it hooks up to the front, and then it fuels it up, and that's the pump that pumps out stuff. It could be. Remember, this is designed to be used in any condition, rather than, that's my theory, at least.
Yeah.
So having it be a bunch of different things in one makes sense, because again, it's designed to be used in places where there may not be infrastructure for fuel. So now it's a pump. So I can pump fuel out of something else. Or
and a pump can be used to pump different liquids. So yeah, I could actually see that. But I didn't want to be too grand and give it too many things. So I kind of, okay. So Pyreworm, what are your thoughts? What do you think it could be there, mate? Or even if it's something else, please tell us.
Well, looking at the size of those units, if they were abiding by any sort of current day scale, they seem actually too big to operate a hydraulic extensible mechanism, something that migrates it back and forth. I mean, those pumps are huge,
right?
And a pump that size would move like 1,000 barrels of liquid mud an hour. It's way more than what you would need. So they seem a little big for that. But thinking about refueling or transferring of cargoes, now they seem like the right size if you wanted to move a lot of cargo very quickly. You want to be snappy about it. That's a good size pump for doing that. And maybe that comes back to that little armature that I picked out on the external model.
Yeah, I'll show that real quick. So he noticed this very quickly that we hadn't noticed. So there's a kind of arm here that kind of comes out over near the cargo containers, and what he's possibly suggesting is this could be used to load and unload the liquid or the gas. And there is one on the other side, but there only seems to be the one deployed forward at the moment. So yeah.
And so maybe it's even something that's just limited to that first slot. Like as you're utilizing the ship for whatever, you have the option of loading into that first slot container for transfer of fuels, and that allows it to serve that role. And that plays into CIG's policy of forcing you to make decisions about what you're doing at all times, and you're giving up a cargo transfer spot to have a fuel container sitting there to fuel the ship up, or you can only move or translate around liquid cargoes or gas cargoes from, like, say, a Starfarer into that first container spot.
Okay. All right. I think we'll kind of wrap it up there. I will leave the description below. I will leave the two links to the Sketchfab models below, so you can have a look for yourself. But yeah, are you guys looking forward to this ship now? You've seen a bit of that, or what's your take on it now? I've kind of shown that to you. Pulse is good.
No,
I like Argo. I like the concept of something that's essentially an infrastructure ship that replaces infrastructure, because it gives a lot of life to the universe. It's obviously something you're not going to use in the game right away, but it's something that, like, I could see being used for players when they're like, hey, we need to get all of this ore off the planet, and we don't have a space station because we're players and we can't build space stations. But we do have Argo rafts that we can then, scoop up all this stuff and then take it to a waiting, whole sea in orbit, and then back and forth and transporting that kind of thing. I can see those sorts of interesting uses for it. So I like that kind of stuff. Diversifies what you can do in the verse.
Definitely. Pyreworm, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, it's definitely for me, the most interesting ship I've seen out of Argo, and I'm eager to see it in game. And I agree with Pub that more ships like this help diversify even if for me it doesn't end up being anything I'm interested in flying, it's something that when I pull up to a port and I see them cruising around the background, it reads real life because hey, there's something I expect to see cruising around.
All right. Lastly, before we head off, if you had to speculate on price, what would you say? So, Paul, I'll let you have a stab at this one first. So, what do you think?
Because of the limited nature of its cargo capacity, and if it's just a cargo tender that can offload and unload things, I would say between $175 and $200. If it also has the ability to refuel on top of that, or have that kind of liquid transportation options, then I would say probably more like 200 to 230. I don't think it would be much over 230, simply because if you look at something like the Katak, which has got 320 cargo units exterior as well, and it's alien tax, it's like 230. So it would be really weird to say that.
I'd round it to 220 because all the other profession starters max at 220. So
around 220.
You're very close to what I'd agree with everything you just said, 100%. So Pyroworm, not to put you on the spot, but that's what we've said. Do you agree, or do you have your own theory?
No, I think that's probably pretty spot on for what it is.
So yeah, somewhere. So would you say 170, Paul, or 150? 150 to 220.
I said one between 175 and 220, depending on how much is variable. If it's just a sky crane and that's it, then a little closer to 175. And if it's more than that, CIG is going to risk not selling it, because that's one of those things where it's like, yeah, it may be useful in the future for what it's designed to do, but like right now, why get it when you can get a Taurus? But if it also, they say, oh yeah, but it also has this fuel capability, not necessarily refining like the Starfare, but can also refuel ships. Like that makes it a little bit more interesting, and so 220 makes about right.
I think they were originally planning to, how they're putting the whole scene of the game and a bit of the cargo refactor. That seems like this was going to come with it. And I think now they're going to release this and it'll just be a cargo ship. But when that refactor comes online, then you'll get all the extra bells and whistles. So I wouldn't be surprised if we hear a bit about that tomorrow. So that's it from us. Let us know your thoughts below. Again, feel free to look at the models and let us know your thoughts as well. We'd love to hear what you guys have got to say, because the more heads that go through, the more ideas we get and the better this becomes. But we've only got to wait till tomorrow. We did leave it a bit late, but as Paul will tell you, we've both been run fairly ragged this week. Thank you for joining us, Pyroworm. Is there anything else you want to add before we sign off, boys?
No. Good luck for the Argo, guys.
Make sure you like the video if you enjoyed this. Comment down below with your own comments. If we're wrong, come back like right after this releases and say nah. If we're so super wrong, because that helps the algorithm anyways. And if you really like all the content that we've been producing over the last week, please subscribe. It helps us a lot, because it helps us know that we're doing the right thing. And
feeding the algorithm monster that is YouTube. Yes. All right. He's been Pyroworm. He's been the Astropub. I've been Execute, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.